In this video, I'm going to show you how to find the equation of a linear function by looking at a graph of that function. And we're going to be writing the equation in slope-intercept form, which we often call y equals mx plus b. So here we have two graphs of two linear equations, and we'll find the equation for each one. So the first thing to review is that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, and that the m is the slope, and that the b is the y value of the y-intercept. So we're going to use that information. We'll just find m and we'll find b, and then we'll plug them into this equation. We'll substitute them in. So in this case, we'll start with a. The easiest thing to find is the y-intercept, and it's right here. So we've got that y-intercept. So that tells us that b is -1. It's always going to be the y value of the y-intercept, xy, so y is the second one, because the x value is always going to be 0. No matter where a point is on the y-axis, the x value will always be 0, because it's not over to the left or to the right. So it's always going to be this number here, the y number, the only one that isn't 0. Okay, and now we need to find the slope of this line. So we can find it using any 2 points on the line. Maybe I'll use the 2 extreme points. So we'll start here at -4, -4, and we'll go up here to 4, 2. So to do that, we'll look at the rise and the run. We could also use the slope formula for this, but because we already have the graph written out, it's pretty big, it's pretty easy to see, and the numbers are pretty simple, I think it's easier just to sort of count the rise and the run on the graph. The rise again is the change in y, and if we look here, our y values go from -4 up to 2, so the rise, we're going up 6. Over here, our run is the change in x values, and the x values go from -4 to 4, so that's a run of 8. So the rise is positive because it goes up, and the run is positive because we're going to the right. So the slope is rise over run, so it's 6 over 8, and then we'll simplify that and get 3/4, 3/4. So the equation of this line then, that's all I need to do to find the equation. Now I'll just substitute in. So we've got y equals mx, so our m is 3/4, plus b. Now b is -1, so we can write plus -1. It's a little more elegant to just write subtract 1. There we go. So to double check, we've got a y-intercept of -1. That looks like it, right? And then our slope is positive. This is a positive slope here. This would be a negative slope. And our slope is pretty close to 1, but not quite 1. And that makes sense, because if we're using the same, if we're going up by the same amount, using the same scale on both axes, then a slope of 1 will be about a 45-degree angle. And this is close, but not quite. So that looks perfect. Okay, in this next equation, in the next graph, there's a few things to notice. First of all, we're not using x and y, we're using c and n. So that's no problem, we'll just use c and n instead. And then second of all is that on the c-axis, the vertical axis, we're going up by 100 instead of going up by 1. So we just have to be a little bit careful when we find our rise. Okay, so we'll start with the y-intercept. And the y-intercept is 200, so we've got b equals 200. And now we want to find the slope. So again, we can use any 2 points. Maybe I'll use these 2. Not for any particular reason, just because there's space to write above them. I'll start here. And again, we could use the slope formula, but because we already have the graph and the numbers are relatively simple, it's easier sort of just to count on the graph. So the rise, maybe this time it's to save space. Instead of writing it as rise, I'll write it as the change in y. So that delta, the triangle's a delta, that just means change. So the rise, or the change in y, is from 500 to 300. So it's 200. We go up 200. And the run, I could fit run in, but to be consistent, I'll call that delta x, which means the change in x. We go from 2 over to 6, so it's 4. So the slope is the change in y over the change in x, which is the same as saying rise over run. And that's 200 over 4. And we can simplify that, 200 divided by 4. We can simplify that to 50. So we have the y-intercept, we have the slope, so we're ready to write the equation. Here we've got to just make a note again. Remember that we've got c and n instead of y and x. So instead of y equals, I'll have c equals. And then m, so 50. And then normally it would be x, but here we're using n for our independent variable, so 50n. And then plus b, which is the y-intercept. And our y-intercept was 200. There we go. So we've got, it's like equivalent to y equals mx plus b, but it's c equals m times n plus b. So, to review, if you want to find the equation of a line in slope-intercept form and you have the graph, you need to find the slope and you need to find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is often pretty easy to identify if it's right on the coordinates that we've got marked. Here it was exactly 200 and here's exactly -1. And then to find the slope, you choose any 2 points and you calculate the rise, which is the change in y, and the run, which is the change in x. And then just substitute them into the equation for m and b. And then make sure that you're using the correct variables, whichever variables are given. Alright, good luck!